Hi folks, so we did a little poll in the group and more people wanted to hear about autoimmune diseases than anything else. So we're going to talk about it. It's a complicated topic. Autoimmune diseases are basically things that cause your immune system to begin to attack itself. And so depending on the condition is where the target actually lies. So if it's, for example, MS, then your immune system starts to attack the myelin in your nervous system, in your brain, your nerves. If it's rheumatoid arthritis, it attacks the synovial tissue in your joints. If it's lupus, it attacks your kidneys. If it's psoriasis, it may attack your skin. And so the conventional medical approach is to actually just get the immune system deactivated. But sometimes there are triggers, and so what I have behind me are some of the things that I think are big triggers, and we need to look at them. So let's start here. Most people think when you talk about inflammation, they think inflammation is a bad thing. But anytime you injure yourself, let's say you sprain your ankle, you're walking up the steps and you trip and sprain your ankle. Your ankle gets swollen, it gets hot, it gets puffy, it gets red, it gets inflamed. And so inflammation is a healing process in and of itself. So when you get inflamed, your body's actual immune system is activated. And so these things called macrophages come in and they gobble up all the damaged tissue so that new tissue can be laid down. They also stimulate local growth factors. So when you sprain your ankle, that's how the activation of the immune system and the local growth factors is how your body knows that it needs to heal that. But chronic inflammation is a different thing. Chronic inflammation means that your body is just making inflammation all the time. There's just some level of inflammation all the time. There are a lot of blood tests that we use for this. CRP, I can't write today. CRP, we use interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, we use Th1, Th2. There's dozens, 12 or more. And then there's different ones specific to different tissues, like there's ones for joints like rheumatoid arthritis factor, HLA, B27. There's all these other things, but we look in that and see what is going on inside the body and if there's a certain level of inflammation. The next thing is what's called mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's like the little energy source of the cell, and that's what gives the cell energy to carry on its processes and also to do its functions, but also eliminate waste. So sometimes this is a genetic thing, sometimes it's a dietary thing. The big one here now, we see a lot of this, is gut dysfunction. Gut dysfunction is when your digestion is not working well. So a good example of this would be celiac disease. So if we put celiac in here, we know people who are familiar with celiac disease, can't write today, celiac disease, we know that gluten triggers the immune system and then you get an attack on the gut. So we know in some cases that there's a trigger. The problem is for most autoimmune diseases, there's no identified trigger. And so that's why we look at food sensitivity. That's one of the other things we look at. But we want to know what triggers this autoimmune activity. Like I said, for most of the things that are treated autoimmune, only thing that's really done is they use different drugs to deactivate your immune system. It starts off with things like prednisone, but it could also be things like Humira, any other drugs they use to kind of deactivate your immune activity and still let you have some level of function. The other thing now we talk about is food sensitivity. And I have a video about food sensitivity. And now we're seeing that folks who have food sensitivity, when they eliminate food sensitivity, that some of their autoimmune disease symptoms go away. Their joints stop hurting. They start having more cognitive activity. They don't feel as tired. All of these different things begin to happen when food sensitivity is identified. So the other factor now, we have genetics, and a lot of people attribute everything to genetics. Here's the truth. There are genes that predispose you to have autoimmune diseases. But whether those genes are activated or not is really more dependent on your behaviors. So if your sister has rheumatoid arthritis and you have rheumatoid arthritis and somebody else has rheumatoid arthritis, okay, you have genetic component for that. But do you also have the same habits? Do you have the same behaviors? Do you eat the same foods? Do you do the same things that may trigger those genes to be activated? Because there might be other people who don't have it. So genes, and then there's a study now, or a science called epigenetics, and basically it takes into account things like diet and lifestyle. As sitting above genetics and turning those genes on or off. So we want to keep that off. Environmental stress. So this is something we all have to deal with. Pollutants, water problems, drugs in the water supply, bad food, things like pesticides, herbicides, all this stuff that we're forced to deal with. We have to process it whether we like it or not. And so everybody does this. Everybody's detoxifying things all the time. The big thing about stuff like Roundup, where you hear about it in the food supply all the time. It's gonna be there. We have some level of that stuff that our bodies are detoxifying all the time. For some people who are already pretty beat up, that their immune system is already pretty banged up, this may be a significant trigger to turn on some genes to activate some autoimmune disease. And then we have just flat out toxins. These are things like mercury, cadmium, lead, aluminum, just bad stuff that we are around. One of my patients now, I'm testing him for heavy metals because he has autoimmune disease. He's been on a lot of drugs. They're not helping him. We got him on food sensitivity diet. It's getting a little better. But I'm like, something doesn't add up. Why is this one marker so high? He's like, I don't know, man. I said, have you been exposed to mercury or anything? And he's like, nah, I don't think so. And I said, well, did you, grow up around any coal plants or anything like that? He goes, oh yeah, there's one right across the street. I played there my entire childhood. We went across there all the time. We were looking in these big things and all that. So we're testing them for heavy metals because that can stimulate a lot of different things. Your body can't or doesn't oftentimes eliminate them, and it gets more complicated because there's things called methylation, and this is a means by which your body can detoxify things, and not everybody methylates very well. And so that goes back to, strangely enough, nutrient deficiencies and things like folates. So if you have problems methylating, you have problems with folates, then you can't get toxins out of your body. And then that goes and activates genetics, and that takes you back to autoimmune. So all of these things are related and interrelated. Sleep issues. So you have to sleep. On average, a person needs 6 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Yeah, you can be an anomaly, you could be an outlier. You could say, hey, I only need 4 hours of sleep, or I only need 3 hours of sleep, or whatever. Yeah, I don't believe it. And I used to be one of those people, and I know I'm not anymore. So this is not something that we can overlook. And it has an effect on your metabolism, and it has an effect on lots of different things. And then stress. So everybody's under a certain amount of stress. Stress just puts more pressure on the entire system. So stress puts more pressure on your immune system. It puts more pressure on your genetics. It puts more pressure on your inflammatory systems, and it puts more stress on your mitochondria, and it puts more pressure on your gut, and it activates more food sensitivities. So your body is also changing too. So all my life I used to eat red pepper flakes. I used to put red pepper flakes on things. And then I noticed, I was starting to have some digestive issues. And I was like, man, what the heck is going on? And I didn't figure it out until one time I had dinner, and I decided that I didn't particularly like what it was, and I put a bunch of red pepper flakes on it. And it absolutely just tore my guts up. And I realized I can't tolerate that anymore. So what does it do? Well, in my case, when I get that kind of complaint, it's like it's like an autoimmune disease almost. It's an irritable bowel disorder where, you know, I'm nearly debilitated, and it's because it's activating something in me that is causing my immune system to attack my own insides. So you just have to watch this. It's complicated when we do work up somebody with autoimmune. You know, this is kind of like where I start, and there are blood tests and things that I will recommend in addition to some of the blood tests that have already been done sometimes. But autoimmune is very complicated, but you can get better. You might not get 100% better. Let's say that you get 80% better, or you have less pain or less function, or you do better. But there have been some breakthroughs, especially for things like MS. So there's a medical doctor, what's her name? Terry Walls. And she basically cured her very advanced progressive multiple sclerosis with massive dietary changes. So she knew certain things were missing, and she had done the medical route, and she was actually a neurologist. So this was actually her field of expertise. And when she looked at it, she realized, I don't really know how to fix this, but I'm hoping my body does. So all of this plays into autoimmune. It's not a simple thing, but it's not just a matter of turning off your immune system. It's trying to figure out what's promoting this immune system attack. Is it a foreign invader? Is it a deficiency? Is it a toxin? Is it a food? What's triggering my body to attack itself? That's where it all comes down to. That's where the pot of gold is. Because if you can figure that out and you can eliminate that through some things like testing and just talking to somebody who does this type of stuff, then your symptom management will go way down because you don't need it, because your immune system's not being activated all the time. A lot more things are autoimmune than what we have been led to believe. There's a good amount of diabetes that's autoimmune. There's a good amount of thyroid disease that's autoimmune. All of this stuff out there, and could be Alzheimer's is autoimmune. We don't know, but we know that there are things that activate your immune system, and that's what the looking is for. That's where we go beyond just suppressive therapy into more investigative therapy. So that's it. Like, share, questions, leave them here. And this will also be on my YouTube, and it'll also be in my other group. That's it. Have a good one. Have a good night.